Heidi ho and welcome back. It doesn't seem like you can watch a news bit or read an article about famine, poverty, or food shortages of any kind without someone mentioning the whole food for fuel thing. There's a lot of controversy about ethanol and biodiesel production in the United States. I decided I'd concentrate on ethanol. You can do your own research and apply the same principles to biodiesel if you like. When I tried to figure out just how much of the world's food supply ethanol was sucking up, it became apparent pretty quickly that it wasn't going to be an easy task. The numbers are all over the place. I found some numbers from the American Corn Growers Association, though, and it seems like their calculations would be fairly reliable. What's interesting, though, if you look at this graphic, only about 6% as of 2007 of all the corn grown in the U.S. went to ethanol production. Hardly enough to starve the planet, which just emphasizes the fact that we have to look beyond the sound bites and hype. Most modern vehicles will run on 15 to 20% ethanol with no problem. At first glance, this seems like it would go a long ways towards reducing our dependence on foreign oil. But if you'll remember back in episode 2, I mentioned that only about 47% of all the oil used in the U.S. goes to transportation, all forms of transportation. And if you consider things like jet planes can't use ethanol, that number goes down even further. It is possible to run a vehicle on 85% ethanol, but you can't retrofit an older vehicle. You'd have to tear it completely apart and rebuild it. You have to have new vehicles. Ethanol is very corrosive, and everything it touches has to be resistant to that corrosion. Every gas station in the U.S. would have to be rebuilt with new tanks, pumps, and pipes as well. Remember our segment on embedded energy? This is going to take massive amounts of it. And who's going to pay for all this? The net return on energy invested of ethanol isn't less than 1-to-1, as you might have heard, but it's still pretty crappy. Remember that as we go along, because I'm going to try to paint a picture for you with regard to alternative energy sources and other oils that we can very quickly cause a situation where we deteriorate our overall energy in our OEI, causing us some serious problems. While we're at it, let's talk about improving the energy efficiency of our food production system. Did you happen to catch this number? It's a pretty good indicator of a system gone haywire. It takes 10 calories of fossil fuel in the U.S. to create 1 calorie of food. And our food has to be shipped on average 1,500 miles before it gets to our plate. Look, I'm not saying that we all have to become vegetarians, but if we all started eating smaller portions of locally grown, free-range chicken and pork, or grass-fed beef, for example, we could go a long ways towards transforming our food production system. One that's designed less about feeding the masses and a whole lot more about corporate profits for big companies. Abiotic theory suggests that oil doesn't come from gajillions of decaying microorganisms, as is the normal view. but rather it's made chemically deep within the mantle of the Earth's crust. This theory's been around for quite some time, but recently it's come to the forefront because of a book written by a geophysicist cat by the name of Thomas Gold. The two most commonly used pieces of evidence for this theory that are used today are one, that NASA has discovered hydrocarbons and methane on places like Saturn's moon, where microscopic organisms probably never lived, and some super deep wells that apparently the Soviets drilled, where they say they found oil deep within the mantle, far beyond the level that any microbes ever existed. I'm no expert or geophysicist, just some old guy digging up what he can on the internet. So I'm not going to call this either busted or confirmed. We'll just call it plausible. But I do have to point out that almost every oil well or even oil field we've ever drilled before tends to follow a predictable pattern, eventually running out of oil. So we're either simply drying up the shallower pockets of oil, or sucking them dry faster than an abiotic oil earth can replenish them. That would mean that if abiotic oil theory is true, we're going to have to drill thousands of wells far deeper than we've ever drilled before to reach abiotic oil at its source. The Deepwater Horizon well is 18,000 feet deep, and that one oil rig cost $560 million to construct. Drilling twice that deep, thousands of times, is going to present tremendous technological, ecological, and financial challenges. Also, how much energy will it take to dig thousands of holes in the ground to 30 or more thousand feet? That net energy return thing is looking worse and worse, isn't it? In the next episode, let's talk about some other forms of energy we've been using quite a bit.